It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host, Smitty. It has been a while. It is 2025. This is our first Penguins show of 2025. If you haven't checked it out already, yesterday our Steelers show came out, so go check out all of our postseason thoughts. Didn't mean to have a hiatus. If you're only checking out the Penguins and you didn't listen to the Steelers show yet, had a little bit of a hiatus. Didn't mean to. It was kind of by accident, but we're back. We're talking Pittsburgh sports again, and fortunately, unfortunately, I mean, we love this. We love the teams, but we hate talking about them sometimes. We could talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins in this case. It's been quite a roller coaster since we last recorded. I believe the last time we recorded, it was pretty much on a good note because they had been playing pretty well.
I mean, the title of the podcast is Back in the Mix, ? So,
yeah, I feel like that's probably a pretty good note. They were in that like wild card-ish spot, but ton of games in hand with a ton of other teams around them. I think that they had gotten, if I remember correctly, the last time we recorded, there were like 4 games in between episodes, and they had gotten a point, at least 1 point in every single game that they played in those games. So things were going well. And now since then, over the past almost a month, it has been quite the roller coaster on not just the ice, but also headlines for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yes, very true. So real quick, just though, as we sit here right now, 46 games played, 44 points. So just 4 games out of a playoff spot, but they've also played more games than anybody else. Anybody else in the Eastern Conference, really, besides the Devils and Bruins, have also played 46. So not necessarily sitting pretty right now, and neither is Tristan Jarry's career. Placed on waivers by the Pittsburgh Penguins, not claimed. So he'll report now to AHL, the Wilkes-Barre team, with Joel Blomqvist coming back up. But I wouldn't say wild, because I feel like this has been kind of a long time coming to see it get to this point. But what is wild about it is we kind of I feel like we had seen the writing on the wall for Tristan Jarry prior to him signing an extension. And then he signed an extension, which left us all scratching our heads. Understanding that the market really wasn't there for them to necessarily make a significant upgrade at the position, but also, to me, not good enough reason to commit that amount of term to a guy that had shown you what he had in net. I just didn't think it was deserving of the contract. It's sad, I think, how far we've fallen for Tristan Jarry and where things have gotten to. Goalie, we know how much of a mental position that it is, so you kind of feel for the guy. At the same time, if you're not getting the results, you got to get out of there. And it's been a long time coming for this move, but I'm glad that it's coming now. And it sounds like it's not just like a short-term thing, not only for Tristan not being at the NHL level, but also for Blomqvist to get an extended look at the NHL level, and not just an extended look at the NHL level, but as the starter. Like Alex Nedeljkovic going to continue being the backup in that role, but it sounds like Blomqvist is going to be like the guy going forward, which is kind of what we were calling for at the beginning of the year, thought we could potentially get, but hadn't gotten. Now it seems like it's time.
Yeah, I honestly was shocked by the news that Jarry was going on waivers. I never thought it would happen. I thought that the Penguins would just kind of eat their own plate that they've made with themselves, so to speak, than having him go down on waivers, because this is a huge deal, in my opinion. I think that this shows that not only did they put him on waivers and they're willing to do that and eat his salary at the NHL level while he's in the AHL, but I feel like this crack open the door for a little bit for a buyout potentially, because there's really no way out of this contract, especially now putting him on waivers, sending him down. There is absolutely no way that anybody wants to take on the contract. Nobody wants to give up assets for Tristan Jarry at this point in his career. And with that term that he still has left on his contract at the number value he did, if somebody wanted to, they could have gotten him for free and taken him off of waivers. Instead, they would have to trade for him. I just don't think that's going to happen. But if Kyle Dubas is willing to put him on waivers and send him down, that to me opens the door for a buyout, which would be kind of expensive for the Penguins over the next several seasons, but something that they might be willing to do in this sense, because I feel like we all knew that contract was a mistake, and we've all heard the same mantra of, well, there was no goalie market that year. They had to do something. They couldn't just go into the season with nobody. And I get that, but like you said, there is no reason you had to give him that term. I have a hard time believing, and I know that NHL I guess agents would probably try to sell it differently. But I have a hard time believing that any other team in the NHL was offering him the same contract or even close to the same contract. So,
and if they were, let them. The Penguins could have 100% gotten away with signing 2 goalies of the Alex Nedeljkovic ilk.
For sure. I mean, it was a mistake from day one. Everybody knew it. It was a mistake the first season of the contract, and now in year 2 of that contract, they kind of have to lay in the bed that they made for themselves. And I think that what this does for the Penguins' future, if they were to buy him out, is give them more flexibility down the road than the next couple of seasons. Because the cap savings, if you look at the buyout itself, in 2025 or 2026, or I know it'd be 2025, 2026. So the hit that he would have against the cap would be 1.747222. So like basically 1.7 million. That's a good saving for next season. But then it jumps up to 5 million the year after that, 4.5 million the year after that, talking about the 27-28 season. So you're 3 years in, you've got a large chunk of change still on the cap. But then from 28 to 31, you're talking about 797,000. So basically 800,000 until 2031, the last 3 years of that buyout. That's something that I think that the Penguins could potentially get behind if they were wanting to move on, just completely rinse their hands of this Tristan Jarry era. Because let's face it, as much as we want the Penguins to be contenders and be in another postseason run with Crosby and Malkin and all of that and relive the glory days, they're really not sniffing that. If we want to be honest with ourselves about the Steelers a lot of the time, like we were on last episode, we got to be honest with ourselves about the Penguins. And I just don't see that happening. And so I feel like the cap hit of 5 and 4.5 million in 26 and 27, that to me is not going to be that big of a deal, because I just don't view the Penguins as being a team that's probably going to be contending anyway. So why is that cap hit really going to matter? Now, after that, 28, 29, 30, you don't know what the Penguins are going to be that far down the road yet. And so having that cap hit at only 800,000, but still having him off the roster, I feel like that would be something that is more palpable for Kyle Dubas. It's more palpable for the Penguins, and something that I could be seeing done. Now, like I said, this is not necessarily going to happen, but I feel like Tristan Jarry being put on waivers, period, has now cracked open the door for a buyout to happen.
Yeah, it's the first step in them admitting what we knew about that contract. I think that, maybe you could say when he was down there on a conditional basis or whatever they did earlier in the season, that was the first step. This to me, though, is like a full-blown admission that they realized they got it wrong and it's not working out. And to be honest, like, could say the same thing about Alex Nedeljkovic. Now, luckily, they don't have like the financial commitment that they have to Tristan Jarry to him, but it hasn't done well for him in net either. I mean, you're talking about 2 guys that are both in the bottom 10 right now in terms of goals save above expected. Either one has had a good season. So and I've had a conversation with somebody that they wouldn't be surprised if he's also moved. Like Tristan Jarry being put on waivers doesn't change the fact that I think the Penguins would like to move Ned before the trade deadline as well. And that's a different conversation to have. But yeah, even though to me it's way too long, I appreciate the admission here. And like you're saying, even though it's not going to come right away, that cap savings down the road will be a game changer. What's going on, everybody? Smitty from Around the 412, and I just want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our folks at Game Changers. Their logo on the screen right now, right above my microphone. Over 2,000 different designs in their catalog. Luxury heavyweight material. I'm wearing one of their shirts right now. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Head over to gamechanger.la or pick6.la to pick up some shirts. And guess what? Use code AT412. Save yourself $10 on your order every single time. Again, gamechanger.la or pick6.la. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Check them out. And I think you're right too when saying when you feel like that the window could potentially open again. I'm right alongside you in thinking that as well. So to me, that is when it's more important to. I know it's 800,000. Essentially, have this contract off the books, and we don't know what the salary cap is going to go up when across the next couple of seasons as well. But yeah, I don't know that I have too much else to add on the Tristan Jarry front. But in terms of Joel Blomqvist, I want your thoughts on him as well. Obviously, got a cup of coffee at the beginning of the season. Think we were relatively both intrigued by what we saw. And I'll be honest, from like a defensive perspective, unless it's in the last 5 to 10 minutes of the game, the defense hasn't looked bad. They just have no clue how to close out games. So I think he's coming into an ecosystem that's played better than they were in his first stint here earlier in the season.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I think we were both of the opinion that if we were running the franchise, we would have continued playing Joel Blomqvist earlier in the season, and he would have just never been sent down if we could have handpicked the starting goaltender. I understand from a semantic standpoint as to why they sent him down, and you had Tristan Jarry and Alex Nedeljkovic as your goaltending tandem. But now that you have opened this door and have basically fervently said that Joel Blomqvist it's his net, he's our starter, and we're going to have it that way moving forward, that is something that this is basically a podcast of me giving praise to Kyle Dubas in this sense, because I did not know if he had the stomach to send down Tristan Jarry and put him on waivers. That has been answered to me. I did not know if he had that to be able to say that Joel Blomqvist is going to be our starting goalie. He has that, and he's proved that to me. Like, this is good things in the light of Kyle Dubas, and whenever people question how he's doing as the job of the general manager, I feel like that is something that is, I would point at this as a good example of something Kyle Dubas has done. He's analyzed his mistake. Everybody knows it was the mistake. He's analyzed it, lived with it, and now he's trying to make better of it by bringing up the, quite frankly, just the flat-out better goaltender at this point in time. He was better at the NHL level when he was up here, and he went down to Wilkes-Barre, and he continued to be even better in Wilkes-Barre than he was in the NHL. Now, obviously, skill gap, that's going to happen, but he did not miss a beat at the AHL level. His save percentage is, I looked at it, I think it's like 912 save percentage, which is higher than it was even in the NHL in that short stint that he had. A sub 3 goals against average. I mean, this guy is everything that I think the Penguins need right now in a goaltender. And then we're not even going to throw around the contending question right now. But just to be competitive in some of these games, not even to get you to the playoffs, but it's just to flat out look competitive. How many times over the last several weeks have we seen the Penguins blow multi-goal leads? Have we seen the Penguins blow games in overtime where they have a goal or a multi-goal lead in the third period, and then they get to overtime or the shootout and they end up losing? It has driven me nuts the way that the Penguins have played recently late in these games. And having a goaltender like Joel Blomqvist can change that fact and can change the outcomes of some of these games just because he can raise his level up higher than I think the other guys can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about it as well. Yeah, honestly, I know that the level of competition's different and can be hard to identify talent at some of these levels, but you look at the prospects that the Penguins have between the pipes, I feel like that is maybe an area that they've been able to replenish a little bit faster than the forward and defensive groups, don't you think? Like, it seems like there's actually some promise for what they have goaltending wise.
Yeah, I think so. And we've talked about how bare that cupboard has been for the Penguins for a long time in terms of like their overall prospects goes. But I don't really think that my thoughts on their goaltending has ever really wavered that much. I mean, even looking at what was the name of the other guy, like Callie Klang, the one that they traded away that was in the same draft class as Joel Blomqvist. I expected a lot from him too, and I don't know exactly how he's panned out, but he was a solid prospect. So after the past several years, my thoughts on their prospect pool never really was about their goaltenders that they've acquired and the goaltenders that they've developed. That's something that you have seen for quite some time from the Penguins that they've had success at. And I feel like they're probably even getting more out of their goaltenders than what people expect going into these guys' play. it's been always been the forwards and the defensemen that they haven't been able to get some guys in, haven't been able to develop. But I think you're starting to see a little bit of that turnaround too. I mean, before the injury, Owen Pickering had been really promising at the NHL level. We've seen a couple of the guys from that Jake Gensel trade do well down in Wilkes-Barre. Haven't really gotten an NHL look yet, but I feel like there's a narrative that is at least slightly changing, and I think that's something that you also have to give credit towards Dubas for, which I just feel like a lot of people don't give Dubas enough credit because they only want to look at the poor decision that he made, like really just in his first year as the GM of the Penguins, or I guess president of hockey ops. He's both. But I feel like you got to look at some of the moves that he's made in the past 6 to 9 months and really give credit where credit is due. He has done a good job of rebuilding this team for the future. I understand that they are on the cusp of a wild card right now. I still don't think that they're a playoff team, but
sure,
it's giving me more promise seeing some of these younger guys and seeing the way he's operating with these younger guys, like giving Joel Blomqvist this shot and moving him forward. That's something that is very promising to me because of what the decision that Kyle Dubas is making.
Yeah, between Larson and Murashaw as well, that's where I was saying I think that there's actually some promise with what they've started to develop in net, and hopefully that continues, and hopefully we see more in the pipeline continue to grow. And I think that that's probably the one area, like you're saying, where Kyle Dubas has worked so far in terms of accumulating young players, accumulating draft picks when acquiring aging players, such as the Kevin Hayes deal, at least getting something else back to take the contract as well, basically buying a draft pick, gives me hope for what the future of Kyle Dubas' Penguins are going to be. Cal Klang, not great. Did get called up briefly this year because John Gibson went on leave when he was having a baby, but didn't actually appear in the game. He just was the backup there, and his first season on the AHL, not great. 3.21 goals against, 8.97 save percentage so far. So not great numbers for Callie Klang in Anaheim, but it is what it is. Like you said, I think that the Penguins have really started to get something going in net there. Moving along from that conversation, though, I mentioned Alex Nedeljkovic, obviously, because he's part of the goaltending group, and we spend a lot of time talking about goaltenders and how I still think he is a piece that could potentially be traded. Marcus Pettersson's the one I think that we're just kind of waiting for, that we assume is going to happen. Beyond that, I think it becomes a little bit more of a question mark. Josh Yohe put out an article basically saying, the Penguins are going to trade their veterans that don't have contract protection from doing so. But like, I'm sitting there thinking about it, and I'm like, beyond Marcus Pettersson, who in the world are we even talking about? Like, who has value that could be traded and doesn't have, a trade protection? Like,
Well, you've got a few people looking at the roster on Puckpedia. You have a few people that have modified no trade clauses that you could move on from. Like if they really want to sell high and you can get somebody to trade for him, like Rickard Rakell having
he was
season.
listed in that and saying that he's not going to happen. Basically, like maybe in the off season they would look into it, but like they'd have to be completely like an offer that isn't going to come. Basically, is what they would have to get. So
I wonder why that is. But, like, is that just like in the off chance that they do squeak into the playoffs? Because to me, if you're going to trade him in the off season, or if you're going to trade him during the season, I would rather trade him during the season where I know
you think the value is the highest right now.
I think his value is at an all-time high, like period. Mm-hmm. And I mean, maybe not like from 7 or 8 years ago, but in his Penguin uniform, this is definitely an all-time high for Rickard Rakell. I know that you still have to convince somebody to take on that contract. He's got 3 years left at $5 million, but he's got an 8-team no trade list. So I mean, there are 24 teams he could be traded to. That could be someone that I would look at and seeing what you could get for him. You mentioned Marcus Pettersson. Yeah, I feel like the writing has been on the wall the entire season. I feel like being back from injury now, he's going to get some more ice time and more looks from some of these teams as we approach the trade deadline in like a month and a half. And I think he's for sure gone. It's really just a matter of when. I mean, I don't know who else he would be talking about. I mean, do you move on from a guy like that is under a contract next year? Like you just traded for him in the offseason for basically getting draft compensation, but like Kevin Hayes, like do you move on from
Sure.
him?
Yeah.
Like,
Like, what's
I
that netting
understand.
you? You
Like,
know what I mean?
I
Like, that's
understand,
what,
like, you do move on from him, but like that's what I mean is like, is there a trade even to be had there? That's what I meant. Like, do you do it? Is like, I just don't know that you necessarily get somebody like one for me. Like, if you can get anything for it, Noah Chari. Yeah, I was literally just about to mention him. He also has an 18 no trade clause. The only guys that have, I don't know. I don't know. But the only guys that have a full no movement clause right now are Erik Karlsson, Chris Letang, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Brian Rust. Everyone else is at least
which
a
beyond Rust,
no
you're not trading
clause.
anyway. Like,
yeah, you're not trading anybody in that group. So I don't know who, like, do they move on from Michael Bunting a year after you traded for him? He has a 10-team no trade list.
Beauvillier
is one I still think is going to be gone. I actually would put him in that camp. I think he's played enough to somebody would take him. Like a contender might take him, even if he's going to be a fringe forward in your bottom six. I feel like that's somebody that a contender might take. He's cheap. He's a UFA, and he's been there.
What's going to happen with that
time,
trade too? So. It's going to be like Dubas trades for a draft pick that's like 3 years down the road, but it's like it's like a 4th round pick because of that. Like he did with the Ruhwedel deal. Like, how's Chad Ruhwedel netting a 4th round pick? Oh, because it's in 2027. Like, he's gonna do something similar with Beauvillier. Yeah. That's my guess. Yeah.
Do you think that there's a chance that he could have traded for POJ just to trade him again?
I mean, no. I think that was setting up for when they do trade Pettersson to have another guy on the left side. Because the way that Yoey made it seem in that article, and go read it if you haven't. We've referenced it enough. We've plugged it enough where I feel like we can't just keep biting from it. But like, he talks about how much the organization loves POJ and wanted to bring him back, like, absent of the thought of trading anybody anyway. So I don't know. I mean, how much do you love the guy to not tender him a contract? I don't know, but they did bring him back. I did give him credit there, but I don't know. I don't know where they're at.
My guys I'd be looking at trading out of the forward group, because the only guy defensively that I think is seriously going to be traded is Marcus Pettersson. That can be traded is going to be Rickard Rakell. I'd look at trading him. Michael Bunting, if you get somebody to give you some sort of conversation with him, I would be open for that. Kevin Hayes, just because, I mean, I just feel like it's not really a needle mover, but it's something you could do. Noah Chari and Anthony Beauvillier. Outside of that, I mean, maybe, do you think Drew O'Connor, there's a chance that he could be moved on from? I mean, he is a UFA at the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. I was going to say, just in terms of what he's provided, it seems like settling low. But if he is a UFA, to me, it kind of seems like he's kind of fallen out of favor. Not to the point where he's a healthy scratch or anything, obviously. Yeah. But like, this is a guy that we thought would be playing on the top line, or certainly within the top 6, and he hasn't, even with injuries taking place. So I could see that for sure.
Yeah, he's a UFA, $925,000, so he'd be cheap on somebody's roster. I don't know. It's tough too, because I feel like the best piece that they have, and I just mentioned this a little bit ago, the best piece that they have to trade as far as forwards go, in my opinion, would be Rickard Rakell, but then you have a contract attached with him. But then if you mention if that happens in the offseason, I don't get the whole offseason thing. I don't get why it would be better to wait for the offseason. I understand if you happen to squeak into the playoffs, it's better to have that type of player than not have him, especially with the year that he's having. But in my opinion, I just don't think anybody should be thinking about the Penguins and the playoffs that seriously. Almost like relating it to the Steelers. Like, were there many people that should have been thinking about the Steelers and winning a playoff game that seriously? It's almost like a similar scenario. I just don't think that the expectations are that high for this team, despite some of the recent play that they've had, and which has gotten worse over the last few weeks. They've started to lose a lot more games in regulation and blowing some of these games. But I don't understand, if the value is at its highest, why would you not strike?
Well, it also just does, because if you're going to say, if they were going to, whether we agree or disagree, if their idea was they feel like they should be a playoff team, so that's what they're going to push for, then so be it. Like, as long as it lines up and I can make sense of it in my head, then okay. But if nothing else about it makes sense, like if you're willing to trade Marcus Pettersson, willing to trade all these other veterans, but for whatever reason you're holding on to Rickard Rakell, that's where it doesn't make sense to me. Like, why is that strays from the plan? And that's why I wouldn't understand it.
Yeah, that's a good point to have too.
So that's the only reason where I'd be scratching my head if he's the one guy that they held on to and then dealt this summer. Like, if you're going to hold on to him and feel like he's part of, because of his term that he has on his contract, and feel like he's still going to be part of the Penguins when they're good, then okay. Again, whether I agree or disagree, that makes sense to me. But if they hold on to him past this year and then trade him in the summer after trading other guys at the deadline this year, makes no sense to me. So yeah, I'm in full agreement there. But like some of the other guys that we're talking about, whether it's like a Chari, Nieto, like these other guys, it's like you're not getting anything for them. They're not making the cut. Smitty from around the 412 here. And while I may not have much hair, the hair that I do have will not be cut by anybody besides Keek at Keek's Barbershop. My friend Christian Circle, been with us since day one. Keek's Barbershop, located 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Download the app, The Cut. Book an appointment with Christian today, or you can do walk-in with Tony or Ashley. But again, Keek's Barbershop, 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Go check them out. Old school vibe in there. Absolutely love it. Cannot recommend them enough. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Maybe I'll see you there. So I have no clue in terms of what pieces all could be moved at the deadline, but certainly Marcus Pettersson is the one that we both feel like slam dunk, no brainer. We feel like it's going to happen. You're throwing Anthony Beauvillier within that same group. I think he's going to be traded, but I wouldn't say as much of a guarantee for me as Marcus Pettersson.
Yeah,
straying away from that conversation a little bit and just looking at this recent stretch that we've talked about here. I was like, it's so frustrating to have conversations with people about this team right now because they can play 45, 50 minutes of really strong hockey. They can look like the better team for the better portion of it. And then collectively, they just all go brain dead for 5 to 10 minutes to end the game. Can't defend, can't get a stop, putting absolutely no forward pressure on, and it's over. And then they'll give up 2 goals within 40 seconds, blow a lead, don't even get a point out of it, let alone getting, losing in overtime's one thing, losing a shootout's one thing. A lot of times they're coming out on the losing end of things without even getting a point. And it would all be frustrating, even watching this team squander leads just to get a point and then lose in overtime or a shootout is certainly frustrating. But in the case of like the Seattle game, it was the epitome of what this Penguins season has been to me. Play really strong in the first period, total dominance in the first period, but only get 1 puck passed. They go to the third period with a 2-1 lead. They kind of hold and play for a while there. Then they give up 2 goals within 40 seconds and it's over. They get 1 shot the rest of the way in the game. Whether, they pull their goalie and have like basically another situation that's like a power play, which has taken a huge leap this year in general. The power play has, but that's another conversation. And generate absolutely no pressure. It's just, it looks like they don't have a plan at the end of games, and their inability to close out games, like we were talking about on the Steelers episode, where it's like, what is one thing that you can kind of like certainly point back to coaching? Like their mindset and the way that they play, the way that they defend at the end of these games. I mean, I don't know what else to point that back to other than Mike Sullivan's job. I think it's going on for far too long. There's been too many changes in terms of personnel. Doesn't seem to matter who's on the ice. At some point, that's where the finger has to point to. And we've talked about this for a while. So I'm saying at some point, we've been pointing it there for a while. But it's just like game after game, sequence after sequence, example after example, where it's just like, how many more times do we have to see this exact same script play out for this team?
Yeah, it's kind of prolonged itself, and it's been frustrating, especially over the most recent stretch that we've had, kind of like the last 2+ weeks of the season. In their last 10 games, they are, if you're not including like the overtime losses as a stat, they're 2-8. They have won 2 games, lost 8 of them. 3 of them are in overtime. 5 have been in regulation. But if you just go and look at the way some of these games played out, having a lead in New York and losing, having leads in Detroit, having leads against Florida, having leads against Carolina, like you are having multiple leads in these games and you're blowing them. I think that's the most frustrating part too, because if we want to get all creative and talk about the postseason, you mentioned earlier they are 4 points out of a playoff spot as of right now. Think about if you flip half of these games to wins, where they could be sitting. And we don't really want to entertain the thought of this team being like a playoff contender because we truly just don't think that they are. But to where they could have found themselves in this recent stretch based off of their first 2 periods to where they are now, including the third period of every single game, or even not even just the whole third period, the last half of a third period, it's just so frustrating because I feel like losing a game like that, it's almost like something that we talk about in all sports. Like, you never want to question the player's effort, but it's like, I feel like finishing out games, that's just all heart. Like, that's just all pure effort in those moments. And the Penguins have almost perfected just blowing that type of game, blowing those types of leads late in those moments. It's like they have perfected the heartbreaking loss for their fans. And so they do it so often that now I'm just kind of numb to it. If they blow a multi-goal lead, it's almost like an expectation at this point that I'd be more surprised if they held that lead than they blew it.
Yeah. No, I'm in full agreement. Like, I just sit there watching games, basically, like, I don't want to say it's background noise. I'm watching the game, but I got like my phone in my hand and I'm just kind of like looking at the TV, looking back and forth. Like, I'm so disengaged from the product right now. Really, the reason that I'm watching, and now I'll be tuned in to watch Blomqvist, but it's really been about just watching Sid. Like, I understand how much of a pleasure that has been, how much of a blessing it has been to watch that guy's entire career play out. And I don't take it for granted being able to watch him on a nightly basis. But the product as a whole that the Penguins have put on the ice right now, it's more entertaining for sure than it's been the last couple of years, but it's just as frustrating still to watch them play like they do late in these games. So it's not unwatchable necessarily, but because I've done such a good job of emotionally detaching myself from sports. Like, in the past, like over the last couple of years, that's been the case, because prior to, I don't know what would have happened with the way that the Steelers have collapsed this year and the way that the Penguins have played the last few years. But I've done a good job of emotionally detaching from these sports. We're like, yeah, it's frustrating to watch. I get over it in about 30 seconds after the game ends. I get to talk about it on here with you, or in this case of the Steelers, on Afternoon Drive with Alan. And that's it. That's the end of that. I just have a conversation regarding the team. Still a big part of my life. Love sports, but I can't let it impact my day-to-day life. And that's how I feel about the Penguins. And that's how I feel about all sports. But certainly with the Penguins, the product has kind of just, I don't want to say turn me into a casual over the last couple of years. I'm still tuning in every game. But again, it's more about Sid. It's more about the individual players, watching him, Letang, and Gino finish out their careers together more than anything else for me. And now, like I said, watching Blomqvist will be a big part of that as well.
And I think having somebody like Blomqvist between the pipes could help in what I was just talking about, like that 2-8 stretch. If Blomqvist is the goaltender, maybe they get more saves. Maybe they have better play in net. And also, I feel like getting this type of goaltender, having your GM make a shift on your team like this, putting your starting goaltender on waivers and then bringing up the young guy, maybe that rejuvenates some of these players on the ice. So maybe that kind of
you would think so,
put a
short
shot
term,
in the
yeah.
arm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to need it, because looking at their schedule ahead, they had this big homestand where they just played the last 5 games of their season at home. The next 7 games are on the road for the Penguins. They go to Buffalo, Washington, LA, Anaheim, Seattle, San Jose, Utah, all on the road. I'll actually be at that Utah game, so looking forward to that. But it's going to be tough for the Penguins. I mean, Joel Blomqvist is literally going to be thrown into the fire with this one. I'm curious to see how they go out. I'm curious to see how they play with the new goaltender, but also I'm curious to see how they want to turn around their season. We're over halfway through, and I feel like all I can ask for at this point, because my expectation is them just missing the playoffs again, is at least show me the effort. Like, if you are losing some of these games, if you lose 2 of your last 8, but I can see the effort on the field, or on the ice, I guess. Sorry. We talk about the effort on the Steelers too, so it's kind of just blending together. If I could see the effort, that's a little different. Like, I can accept you losing these games because I know deep down, I mean, literally the conversations are mirroring each other right now from our Steelers show. The roster's not that good. Anybody that looks at the roster and really looks deep down and just accepts it for themselves, the roster is not that good. The team's not supposed to be that good. And when you accept that fact, you're looking more so for the effort that these players are putting in than the actual results that you're getting from them. If I feel like the team is giving me the most effort, I'm not going to be complaining as much or being that upset about some of these losses. But whenever that lack of effort is the reason that you're losing some of these games because of these blown leads, that's where the frustration still comes in. Even in moments where we still emotionally detach ourselves from these things, it still gets frustrating watching this happen and knowing that a lot of it has to do with the effort on the ice. So maybe with Blomqvist coming up, that gives them like a shot in the arm and is able to, at least for the short term, give them a motivational kick that they need. We'll see how it plays out, but you still got like less or around half a season left. I mean, it's a lot of hockey to be played. We'll see where it ends up. We'll see who gets moved when. I mean, we're still about a month and a half away from the trade deadline, so probably not going to see a ton of action yet, but it's going to be coming soon. And I'm very curious to see at that point, what do the Penguins look like? Because a month ago, 6 weeks ago, we were talking about like, hey, maybe this team could squeak into the playoffs. 6 weeks from now, what's it going to look like?
Yeah, on our next podcast next month, we'll let you know how things have gone.
Yeah.
Now, back to regularly scheduled programming here with Around the 412. So, over the next week, like you mentioned, the stretch that's coming up with, would you say they have how many on the road?
They have 7 in a row on the road.
Jeez. Yeah. So Buffalo, that will have already happened by the time you guys watch this. Capitals, Kings, Ducks, Kraken, which is the one you were talking about, and then at San Jose, at Utah. Yeah, they're not home again until next month. So
February 1st.
Jeez. But they'll have played 3 games by the next time that we talk. So look forward to that. Sabres, Capitals, Kings. We'll see how they come out on the other end of that and see the direction that this team decides to go, because that will be here before we know it. Anything else?
No, I'm excited to watch Yoel. That's the main thing I think a lot of people are going to take away from this podcast is that we are excited to see the change in net and see Joel Blomqvist be the full-time goaltender.
And I think, just based off social media, that a lot of people would resonate with that idea as well. So let us know in the comments how excited you are to see a new number 30 taking over for the Penguins in net. Maybe they can get 2 cups out of this one too.
Maybe, but if one of them happens this season, I'd be shocked.
Anyways,
one more thing. The last thing, there was this tweet, and I don't know who it was. Either like I can't remember who it was. I don't know if it was Penguins Jesus or if it was Pittsburgh Clothing Company. I don't remember who it was.
2 very different accounts.
I know they're very different, but I just saw it while I was scrolling, and I didn't like it or anything but I thought it was so funny. It was Tristan Jarry, and the meme was like Alex Nedeljkovic is traded. Joel Blomqvist is out with a lower body injury. It's April 7th or whatever the date was, and the Penguins are 3 points out of the postseasons with 2 games left. And then it was that Thanos meme from Marvel, like, where does that bring you? Back to me. And it was Tristan Jarry on the last 2 games of the season to get the Penguins into the postseason.
Oh, man. Yeah. No. Can't have it.
Can't have it. But, I mean, with the recent goalie history with the Penguins at the end of the year, I don't know that it's necessarily likely that we'll see him again, but I'm not going to say it's impossible.
No, absolutely not. But all right, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification, but of course, hit us in the comments with your thoughts, any questions, all that good stuff. If you're listening somewhere else, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe over there, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from. be sure to do that. Just search Around the 412. You'll find us there. Same thing on all of our social medias. And check out the description, whether you are watching or listening to this, for a bunch of links from all of our sponsors. Right above Tyler right now, Marcelo Electric, our friend Brandon Marcelo, a.k.a. Boots, started his own electrical company, and he's serving 4 different counties, one of those being Beaver County. Yes, if you listened to last month's episode, forgot the county that I actually live in, but along with Beaver, Allegheny, Lawrence, and Butler County areas as well. Residential, commercial, whatever you need, he can help you out. So hit up Marcelo Electric Facebook page down below, and then from there, his email, his phone number in there. Get in contact with him for all your needs. Game Changers, which we played the ad for, of course, save $10 using code AT412 at checkout. Everything custom designs, our friend Haley Wagner Small Business. You can get a t-shirt, long sleeve hoodie with our logo or your logo, anything that you want to customize on a piece of merch, even some different tumblers. She's got a lot of stuff going on over there. But also Valentine's Day next month, get something for a loved one during that time of year. And then I don't know what part of the world you're in, but if it's warm over there and you want some shorts, DC4L Customs, get some of our Around the 412 shorts. That link down below as well. Again, this has been Smitty and Tyler for the Around the 412 Penguin Show. And I don't think you'll see us in a month. I think you'll see us next week. So until then, we'll talk to you.